Hello and welcome to our webcast, Global Secure Access Unlocked. Today, we will share some experience about our real-world implementation of GSA in the Managed Red Tenant. My name is Naunheim. I'm a cybersecurity architect and technical lead for Managed Red Tenant, and I'm here together with my colleague Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Brumm. I'm also a cybersecurity architect. So my main topic in this project was global secure access. And yeah, let's have a look how we integrated it there. And but before we start, Thomas, what was the main reason for starting this whole project?
Yeah, we have seen in many of our preventive services and our assessments that there's still a big topic when we are talking about avoid and mitigate lateral movement paths. And I have here some quote from the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. And Microsoft has given some statistics that over 93% of ransomware incidents includes also insufficient controls when it comes to privileged access. And that also leads into lateral movement. And I think, Chris, that is something that we can see quite a lot, right?
Yes.
And the reason for that is quite obviously that it seems to be still a hard job to securing privileged access. And it starts by how I can provide securely a separated identity to doing privileged tasks, but also having adoption of a PAW, a privileged access workstation, is quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, we have a big need and it high complexity. So that's why many companies are hesitating or struggling to implement this. And the stuff that we've seen in the past was not my my grade of completeness I'd like to see in this. And let's have a look.
Yeah, and we go a step further with the Managed Red Tenant. And because we mentioned already 3-4 times the word, what is now this Managed Red Tenant and how it plays a role into privileged identity and access? So what we did is we believe the strongest isolation, and that is the key when we are talking about securing privileged access. It is the hard job to separate high privileged users from your regular users. For example, doing not your high privileged task on the device with internet or email access.
Yeah.
And that may be not the smartest idea, right?
Yeah.
And also, if you like to run a privileged admin workstation within one tenant, that could be hard to have the isolation within a tenant.
Yeah, there are several infrastructure components that I've seen in poor deployments that have been shared. Also network environments, so stuff like VPN gateways or secure web gateways.
Yeah, and we believe it is really important to have a strict separation. And the strongest separation that we can choose is having a separation by the tenant boundary. Yeah. And what we did with the Managed Red Tenant, as the name said, we built a completely separated tenant for the customer, which is on a green field. So there's no dependency to brown field, to any business application that needs maybe specific permissions that maybe not alignment with your high security requirements of privileged users.
Yeah, and it's easy to integrate because you can just plug it on and on your existing environments.
Yeah, and the next step is when we have Managed Red Tenant, so a separated tenant, that will be a home for your privileged devices. And even if you have maybe a multi-tenant environment, because you have also staging tenants, or you like to have, for example, for your custom identities also a separated tenant, you can manage the multi-tenant environment from the Red Tenant. And for us, it's quite important that everything in the Managed Red Tenant is defined as code. Because we as Glückkanja, we have a blueprint how a red tenant, how a PAR should look like. And we will maintain all the stuff for you. So that will be our configuration, and that is also written as code. That's a quite important
and you can ensure a two-man principle and separation of duties.
That's quite important. And so what every Managed Red Tenant has in place is an Azure DevOps environment that is also particularly configured for your Managed Red Tenant. And as Chris, you already mentioned, the 4 eyes approach. So
Yeah.
we, as the managed service provider, we will not have the full control over your environment. So we will suggest changes. For example, if Microsoft has some improvements for conditional access and we'd like to take advantage of new features, so we will make a change in the configuration file and send you over a pull request. And you have the chance to review what are the guys by Clucania doing here with my Red Tenant, and then having a review of
Yeah,
this.
in my opinion, this is one of the key features. So it has to be one of the pillars.
Definitely. But in the end, there could be always some configuration, and there's no API to configure everything as code. So we have a fallback in this scenario that if there's a change that can be also only made by the UI, that we, for example, request a role to configure that in the portal UI, and you have still the chance for giving us an approval. So there's no direct access from a Clucania employee to the Red Tenant. And also the Managed Red Tenant includes our CSOC. It's quite important, such a critical environment like a Managed Red Tenant should be and must be monitored 24/7, and that is also one of the key aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, finally, you can already see a lot of stuff included, right?
Yeah, but today we have to focus on that Entra private access and the internet access part. So the other stuff is already discussed in other webcasts. So let's focus on this today.
Yeah, right. And that brings us also to some of the aspects. I think when we have a lot of Entra configurations here in place, like the cross-tenant access policies and so on, you will later see how global secure access plays an additional role, because I think that is also a big thing that we need to mention.
Yeah.
There's something that we haven't been able to do, for example, a couple of years before, because most of the features that we will cover today have been introduced in the recent few years, right?
Yeah, a lot of this is brand new.
Right.
So, and I'm myself, I'm an owner of a privileged admin workstation, and it's obviously the strongest choice that we can take for administration. But right now we're at a conference, we're at the Workplace Ninja Summit, and I don't want to carry 2 notebooks with me. So there are situations when you want to access a virtualized environment, and maybe you don't want to hand over everyone in your administration team privileged admin workstations. That's why we integrated the virtual access workstation, so the VAW, into the design that can be accessed from the Office PC.
Let's have a closer look about this PAR and this VAW and what are the differences, right? So let's start with the PAW. And Chris, as you already mentioned, it is the most secure option.
Yeah.
So we have this wording about the clean keyboard approach. So you have a full separated hardware, a full separated device, so fully isolated from your MacBook or from your other device. And what we really like to achieve is we like to stop that you're not doing any privilege access, any administrative task from your regular device anymore. And we move that to the PAW. And there's a couple of options with conditional access to block those privilege access and enforce the admin to use a PAW.
Yeah, that's an important point. It is enforced. It's not only an option to do the PAW, so it is enforced.
Yeah,
and it has to be.
And it's a one-to-one binding, right? The user has the power, and only the Red Tenant user can be used from this PAW.
Yeah, let's have a look at the other option. So the other option would be a virtual access workstation that we can also use to administer the environment. And we have that login from the Office PC there. And this is a critical point that we will discuss intensively in this webcast. And it's maybe for, another audience.
Yeah, right.
Or other situations. It's still blocked to access the environment directly from your Office PC. That has not changed. And so we have a single device that is accessing our environment, but we have a way to that virtual access workstation.
Yeah, if we take a look on both options, you already mentioned there's maybe a different audience. Because with the PAW, as we already mentioned, you have the most secure way to provide access for your privileged user. And that could be, for example, for your control plane users. So that would be your colleagues with global admin permissions. And I hope there are not thousands of global admins in your environment. So there's just a handful of PAW devices or the users that require support.
Yeah, this is a solution you should use in doubt. So
Yeah.
if you're not 100% sure, is this really needed in this situation? So I think for me, the virtualized environment is for, okay, I'm sure I can lower the bar at least a bit for this situation.
Yeah, that could be more the wide audience of people that manage Azure workloads. So where you need to also scale a privileged device. And we spend a lot of energy, time, effort to find a good way, because there are many people out there that say, hey, we can use just a jump host or a simplified Windows 365 device, but we did some additional layer on the virtual access workstation, and that will later something that works only with global secure access, and it's a cool thing to highlight.
Yeah, let's dive into this. And at first, we have a simplified version of that picture.
Just a simplified, right?
With and you can see, okay, we have some arrows here, and some of the arrows are connections. And yeah, global secure access is good for securing connection. Let's have a look at the first one. So which kind of use cases do we have? At first, we already talked about it. It's the access from the Office PC to the VAW. This is a very critical point. And we can use Entra Private Access for it. And we can also use Entra Private Access for the access from the PAW and the VAW to the on-premises infrastructure, or your Azure landing zones, or everything that is not internet or SaaS services. And for internet and SaaS services, we have the other part, so the internet access part, where what we can use to control all the traffic to needed web applications, SaaS services like Azure DevOps, or other tenants. So with the tenant restriction feature that we can, that we will highlight in a few minutes. And let's start with one thing is missing.
Oh, what is missing, Chris?
We have a lot of more logs.
Yeah, of course. And hey, we are also security guys.
Yeah.
And what could be better to have more insights?
Yeah, for a security team, there's nothing more lovely than more logs.
So as I already said, it's quite important. Such a sensitive environment, right, like the Red Tenant, needs very close monitoring.
Yeah.
And what we can see, of course, the Red Tenant is built on top of native Microsoft Entra features. But the cool thing about global secure access, we have some additional signals. And those additional signals that we have in place, we as people that also write detections and like to hunt in case that something goes wrong in a tenant, we love signals.
Yeah.
And that was one of the cool things.
There's some stuff in it that helps us to connect the dots between the clients, the services, the identities, and so on. And yeah.
We come to the point later, and you will love it.
Let's start with the VAW. So what have we done with it?
Yeah, so as I said before, it's quite simple. To set up Windows 365, maybe also Azure Virtual Desktop is quite straightforward to configure. But as I said before, we go a step forward. And what we did is Azure Virtual Desktop is a PaaS service. So normally a cloud service is public available, so you have public endpoints.
Yeah, that's the nature of these services.
Yeah, that works as designed, right? And what we did is we locked down Azure Virtual Desktop into a virtual network. So as you can see here, it is really integrated into a virtual network. And when we're talking about public access, we restrict that there's no public endpoint. So this virtual access workstation is only available through a private endpoint.
That's an interesting point.
No availability, so you cannot go to an internet cafe like in Switzerland, and then jumping on this VAW.
So you say there is only an option for a private access, right?
Yeah.
Okay, like let's try to see if we can use Entra private access for this. And in a nutshell, Entra private access is the solution for the ZTNA access that allows us to access stuff that is not routable, it's only private accessible. And we have the full integration, the full power of conditional access with device compliance, risk-based approach, strong authentication, and all of that. And on top of it, yeah, the access out of the VAW is also restricted by private access and Entra internet access, right?
Yeah, and it's really important that we underline here one smart short word, and that is identity switch. So the real magic that works here behind the scenes is we not only have a secure way and make access to the VAW, we have also identity switch, which means, as you already mentioned, we get the signals from the regular user, from the Office PC, and after the authentication, after everything is in a good position, so the user has a strong authentication, there's no risk by the user or by the client, the accessing device, we will have to switch to the Managed Red Tenant user. And that, I think, is the really game changer in the story, and it makes it different from a jump host or from any other solution, because two identities are in place and we have the origin signals from the device.
Yeah, and we can enforce a lot of security on both of these identities.
It is. Nice.
Yeah, I'd like to see this.
Yeah, should we have a look on that one? So let's have a quick demo, and it's quite not special what you can see from the Managed Red Tenant user perspective, because everything works behind the scenes. So we are here on the Office PC, and what works here on the Office PC, first of all, you get prompted. And prompted to use now your FIDO2 security key, so the security of authentication to the Managed Red Tenant, for example, enforces passkeys, device-bounded passkeys, because now it's the time for accessing your VAW, and we like to see that you have the security key and then having the authentication.
Yeah, and this is the login at the VAW. This is not private access. Private access is running smooth with single sign-on.
Right. And after I did here the authentication by using touch on the security key, we are here in the Windows application and then having a connection to the VAW. In the meanwhile, you can see here in the upper right corner that we are using the Managed Red Tenant identity, and bam, we are on the VAW device. So it was quite seamlessly for the user, just having the prompt to have the authentication with your Managed Red Tenant user, with your passkey, and then you're on the desktop for the VAW.
Yeah, here we go.
Was that quite simple? There's a lot of magic behind the scenes. Honestly, it looks quite simple, but it has been some effort to build a whole solution, right?
A little.
A little.
Okay, let's move on. Login successful. And the next thing, what we do is, okay, we want to access some stuff.
Yeah, right.
Let's start with everything that is public, available in the internet. And everyone who has ever designed or built a PAW knows, okay, we want to lock down the stuff as much as we can. So I want to enforce a rule set that allows only specific named resources in the internet. So let's like specific websites. And I want to go a step further. There are some services like Azure DevOps where you have different repositories, and this is behind the slash. So you can just use an FQDN or something. You want to allow maybe specific repositories, like in this case, the Red Tenant repository. And this is done by the internet access part. And before you can do this, you have to sign in to Entra, and profiles get applied, and we can enforce MFA and device compliance and all of that stuff. And Then we have a granular engine that is assigning security profiles, and we can use all of that features to restrict internet.
Nice.
And we can inspect TLS. In this point, it's very important to inspect TLS, but because without it, that stuff like with the Azure DevOps repo wouldn't work. So, and yeah, but
A lot of stuff
sometimes
included, right?
job done. No, we are not yet done. One of the challenges is that not all services, and especially Microsoft services, don't have dedicated URLs.
Yeah, right. That's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, and but before we look at this, let's have a look. We like data. We like logs. We have
course.
some more logs. That is the first view on it. And in the past, many used stuff like a local config or a centralized secure web gateway. And one of the main pains with the local config was we haven't seen what was blocked.
Yeah, right.
And troubleshooting was not easy because we don't have administrative rights on the PAW. So with this solution, we can see everything that is blocked, and we can adjust our rule set and question it. And we can use the stuff later on in a situation where it gets serious and we want to know, okay, what has happened. But let's come back to that situation where we don't have separate URLs, right?
Yeah, and also just to recap what you already mentioned in the very first beginning, all the features that we've seen so far, including this reporting, it's Entra native, right?
Yeah.
There's 100% cloud native features, technologies behind that. That's no on-premise legacy or traditional proxy. And we have, for example, this is, I think, one of the workbooks that is part of the solution.
Yeah, it's built in.
Built in, and that's quite easy to use. So really amazing stuff. But you mentioned when we are talking about accessing, and yeah, you need to have a specific URL to block that. What about the portal stuff? And
Yeah,
I think that's
so security portal, Azure portal, all of that stuff has no dedicated URLs.
Yeah,
You can't see from the URLs. If you just use, I don't know, the web filter function from Defender for Endpoint or something, you won't be able to have a granular stuff. So what we want to have is a situation where only the user in the MRT is able to access the tenants we want him to be able to access. And we don't want that the user from the workforce tenant, so the office user of the admin, or any other user from any other tenant is able to have any connection from the PAW. And the main feature that we're leveraging for it is tenant restriction. So tenant restriction is a feature that is signaling the Entra tenant, okay, this client is bound to that tenant. And this means the workforce tenant user will be blocked, any other user will be blocked, and on top, we can ensure with another feature, with the cross-tenant access policy, that the user is only able to access specific tenants, so that we have an allow listing, okay, this tenant can be managed and accessed, and so on and so on.
And what we love about cross-tenant access policies is that we have our authentication strength, so our signals from the device in place. So, for example, if you already did a strong authentication and we have a compliant device in the Red Tenant, that will be something that we can, use for accessing also the workforce or any other resource tenant.
Yeah. Okay.
Should I try that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Demo
time. So let's try if I can break it, how it works behind the scenes. So when we see here, once again, the VAW, so first of all, we also use identity governance. So in this case, my Managed Red Tenant user has the option to go to my access, and in my access, I have the opportunity to request that I like to have access package that allows me to accessing a tenant. For example, this tenant that we now see so far. And seamlessly, we can navigate now by using, for example, the Defender portal to accessing this tenant, and it feels seamlessly. There's no change.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out one more time that this is a built-in feature. So
Yeah, right. And if I use an unauthorized cloud provider, this, for example, this Naunheim cloud stuff, that is something I don't like to allow because it's not an authorized privilege interface or endpoint, and that is something that will be blocked. But what about if I change my identity? We had this mentioned before, right? So I now like to start and use a private window here to accessing, for example, with a separated identity. That could be my Microsoft account, that could be any identity that is not relying to the Managed Red Tenant. And
this is tenant restriction,
nice.
what you see. And so you can see it in the error message, tenant restriction policy added. And yeah, we've bound that client to that tenant, and we lock down the access as far as possible to this. And with built-in features. So with Entra and global secure access features.
So let's have a summary. I can only accessing tenants that are allow listed for the cross-tenant stuff. I'm not allowed to use any privileged interfaces that are not well known, and we have a reporting capability to understand if we are blocking something that it makes no sense to block it, right? And that is quite a good option.
Yeah, I think we can make a check mark and everything regarding internet and tenant or Microsoft stuff. But we don't only want to manage stuff in the cloud with it, right?
Yeah.
There is another scenario. Some of you still have an on-premises environment, or you maybe only have Azure landing zones or so, but you want to exit it with your PAWs or your VAWs. And this is the moment where Entra Private Access can, support us and bring its full capabilities. And to recap how it works, in this case, the VAW is establishing a connection to the cloud, to the Microsoft tenant. And on the other hand, in the data center, in your on-prem data center, in your Azure landing zone, you can have multiple of them. There are also agents. Mm-hmm. These are small applications that are running on Windows servers, and they are publishing the on-prem resource. And then the client is establishing a session to that resources. But before he is able to do it, we have a pre-authentication with Entra ID. We have a micro-segmentation for the different apps, and we have a per-app tunnel. And this allows us to scope down that stuff very, very granular and have a least privilege approach also in the network. And since these are apps in Entra, we can also apply the full power of conditional access and enforce device compliance, MFA enforcement, use the primary refresh token, and so on. And we also have a built-in DNS forwarder and all of that stuff that you need to access your on-prem environment.
So real cloudification of our good old friends and resources in the on-prem environment.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd like to show.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we're directly starting. As you can see, my test user, admin cookie,
the good old friend,
is using Entra Private Access. And it has some rules applied to it. And at first we enable our logging. We love logs. And then, we try to access a domain controller. And what we can see, there's a sign-in prompt. This is something that we can configure. We can say, we want every time someone is accessing the on-prem environment.
Fresh authentication, right?
Yeah. And the user is trying to log in, and
what happened?
Yeah, your administrator has configured that the app has to be specifically granted.
So no cookies for Cookie Monster.
And the cookie has forgotten to enable his group membership. So this is just-in-time administration. So cookie is using privileged identity management and will activate his group membership. And now, since the monsters are taking security very serious, it only works after admin Elmo has approved it.
So another colleague, so Elmo is now
Yeah.
the second ice period now. comes
So
into
yeah,
play.
we have another point where we can implement a two-man principle.
Nice.
And so yeah, Elmo is approving it, and let's switch back to Cookie. Cookie gets a mail and so on, and stuff that you know if you are familiar with privileged identity management. And now we can see, okay, yeah, there's a group membership, and another built-in feature, so that we can only apply to new resources. So another sign-in is needed, and after that, we hopefully will see a connection to our domain controller.
Drum rolls. And
And it works.
it is so amazing to see. That is something you can't do with traditional VPN. On this level, with the particular...
No. You usually will get a token that is valid for, I don't know, 24
Open the
hours.
doors
And no microsegmentation and so on. And this is one of the primary use cases for global secure access. And yeah, it is made for stuff like admin access.
So it plays, obviously an important role now when we talking about on-premise.
Yeah, and you would do the same for users, for end users,
Yeah.
but for admins it's much more powerful. Let's move on. One of the things, so I've talked a lot about least privilege and verify explicitly. So what can we check before we allow, and how can we reduce? But if we want to have a real zero trust network access, we need one more thing that we can add. We have to assume that components are breached. And what do you think? What is the most likely component that could be breached?
Yeah, I think it becomes clear that one of the core principles also for the Managed Red Tenant is that we have in mind a assumed breach approach. So there can be always some weakest link that will be used to compromise the privilege access. And in this scenario that we mentioned before, the weakest link, of course, is the Office PC. So the accessing device for using the VAW, and that is something we must consider, that there could be a case that an Office PC is compromised, and even it's a lower privilege user that could have a big impact. So let's see, attacker has compromised an Office PC, like using an info stealer or something like that.
Click on a mail or whatever.
There's a couple of options you can use as an attacker. And then you have the risk about this whole accessing chain that is under risk. Now, it becomes quite interesting that we have a feature in Entra called Continuous Access Evaluation, CAE. And it's also a big aspect in global secure access, because it allows us with universal CAE, in case of a critical event, to interrupt the connection. And there's no way for for continue or keeping the connection to the VAW. And that's not only for the access path from the Office PC to the VAW. As we already mentioned, we have the use case, of course, that a VAW or a PAW will be used for accessing privileged interfaces, on-premises resources, as we've seen so far. And we have, once again, the universal CAE that interrupts quite in near real time, isn't it?
Yeah. You will have a chance as a user, if it's, I don't know, something like a false positive or so, to re-authenticate until it's cut off. But if you don't, you're cut off.
Yeah. And by default, we have this whole token lifetime when we talk about access tokens from 1 hour. And a 1 hour time is for a tagger. It could be used for persistence.
With a tier 0 account.
It could be really a bad day, even for this 1 hour. And should we have a look on that?
Yeah.
How it works? So
this is stuff we want to see in the demo.
Definitely. And let's have this scenario. As I said before, we have a user that accessing from an Office PC, and as an incident response, your SOC, our CSOC, has decided to revoke the session tokens. And we did that now here in the environment. And as you can see, it's a little bit fast playing video, that around, let's see, a little bit more than 5 minutes, the connection to the VAW will be interrupted. There's a disconnection.
Yeah, and this could be from a click from your SOC, but it could be also complete automatically. If
Right.
the user is going to high risk, this will be triggered in full automation.
Right, so continuous access evaluation supports a couple of critical events that will lead into the situation that we can see here. And yeah, it's quite impressive to see. And what is the result at the end of the day? We are enforcing a re-authentication. So now we have the Office PC and no active connection to the VAW. And the user has to re-authenticate so far. And what is really now the chance for the user, also for the SOC. So in case that we confirm the compromise of the user, we can also disable the user. And even he gets the reprompt and is leading into a re-authentication, we will block to reconnect and have regain your access.
Yeah.
So that's really the way for containment.
Yeah, and we have similar stuff that we can use if only the administrative user was detected as compromised.
Right. And the big question is, now we have seen it took a little bit more than 5 minutes. And 1 hour to 5 minutes, it's quite a good improvement when you're talking about user containment. But even within the 5 minutes, there can be a lot of stuff.
Be done a lot of evil things. And one of the additional things that we get was integrating more GSA into it. We got more logs.
Yeah.
And we can see more what happens and what the attacker has done.
Right. And I think one of the things that we really have as a really important rule, we not only like to collect logs, we really like to connect dots. We really like to understand what is the relation, and we really like to take benefit on logs and not only increasing the cost for ingestion of logs.
How can we correlate that?
Yeah, and that's, I think, the major point. And as we already mentioned, now we have signals from private access and internet access into the game. And if we take a look on the whole authentication flow, of course, there's tokens involved. And the Cookie Monster also loves tokens, not only cookies. And what we have here in place, as soon a Managed Red Tenant user from the VAW, from the PAW, is requesting access, there's a connection, a communication to the token endpoints in Microsoft Entra to get the tokens for accessing the resources. And that offers us to get additional signals and build a correlation between the Entra sign-in logs, but also the network access events.
Yeah, we can see the sessions that have been established with this token.
Right. And it's not only about the authentication events, it's about the connectivity, about the applications that really started the communication over the network. And we have a lot of transaction network communication in place. So it's obviously for internet access, but it's also included for Microsoft Entra private access. And once again, when we're talking about Entra private access, there are also tokens into the game. And when we're having access to a resource tenant, to, for example, a workforce tenant, my resources that I like to manage in Azure, once again, there are tokens involved, and I have also my signals from the connected tenants in the
Yeah, this is really interesting. So correlate cross-tenant logs in this scenario.
And maybe you ask, hey, you talk a lot of correlation, and it sounds a little bit, how that helps in real world. And we have some examples in play how we as CSOC take advantage of this correlation, because we have some questions that we ask ourselves in cases we need to double check for indicators of compromise, and we like to start hunting. Here's the first example. When someone is accessing a workforce, a resource tenant, with the signals and the log details from Global Secure Access, we can not only see if the connection has been established through Global Secure Access, we also see who was what is the process that has started or initiate the process, and details like agent version, some telemetry that could be also quite interesting. When we go a step further, you like to maybe identify who is accessing my tenant as a global admin. And I hope that everybody that is using a managed red tenant likes to use them for high privileged users like global admins. And for example, in this query, I'm looking for any directory role assignment to a global admin, and then ask myself, is this directory role assigned to user from the managed red tenant, and is the managed red tenant user coming from a global secure access? So that I really like to start hunting to make sure that all of my IT colleagues are following the new privilege access path to use a managed red tenant device and a user for
we want to be
access.
able to detect if an evil attacker or lazy admin is trying to bypass all of that stuff.
Right, and we have seen that many years before in ESAE and traditional PAV PAW projects, where after a couple of years later, the first admins already still using the workaround. And now we get not only with conditional access a proactive way to enforce security guardrails, we can also start hunting. Last but not least, there's a couple of tokens in a Microsoft environment, and Microsoft is still working hard to get CAE support for many privileged interfaces. But maybe you have some access that is not supporting, or tokens that are not supporting continuous access evaluation. And we have seen it can take 1 hour until this token expired. And now we have a containment scenario. So a managed red tenant user or the Office PC from this user has been compromised. And we like to know what happened after the user containment. Is the attacker still using some replayed token, or is still in a possession?
If this is a smart attacker, he will be at first dump all of the tokens and try to access stuff from completely out of our environment.
Right. And so the big question is, we are now in a high maturity scenario of attacks called post-authentication attacks. So someone already have stolen tokens, and conditional access and everything else is out of the game because continuous access evaluation is not triggering a re-evaluation. And what we can do here is, now we have an example, a token has been revoked, and there has been activity by the token still after the revocation, and as we can see, up to 10 minutes later, and it could be up to 1 hour, there's still activity.
This is not for prevention, but we can see, okay, what has happened afterwards.
Right, and we like maybe hunt for a particular action, because if an attacker figured out that there has been already containment measurings or actions, they will switch over to persistence, and that could be something that they disable policies, they adding sensitive permissions to compromise service principles or something like that. So we get really detailed view on what is the activity by the attacker, and can follow the crime scene very close by.
Okay.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And we love logs, honestly. We love logs, and we hope we will never need to use them for hunting in the case of a red tenant compromised user, but that gives some additional
It feels good to be able to.
Right. So, we covered a lot for today.
Yeah, but this is only a part, so a small part. So we took a look at, I don't know.
Here we are. Endpoint and also the AVD story so far.
Yeah. If you want to know more, there are more webcasts with Thomas about the whole managed red tenant stuff. And today, I hope we could give you, an idea what we are doing with Global Secure Access for ourselves, for our services, for our managed red tenant. And
Yeah, I
have you
think
forgotten something?
Yeah, one thing is something that I like to underline. We are very happy as Clicania to build such a service like Managed Red Tenant, and as you can see here on the slide, it really covers a lot of technology areas. And we are so happy to have workplace Azure security experts in our company, and it's a project across our units, and we worked really hard and close to build such a solution. And we have seen some demos, and it looks super simple for a Managed Red Tenant user, but integrate and having all the technology in place in one managed service, it's really one of the cool things, and was so much fun to work together with the colleagues on it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. See you next time.
See ya.